Welcome to my channel. Today I will show you an American mystery horror movie called Secret Window. Spoilers ahead. Be careful and careful. The film begins with Morton Rainey. He is a crime writer and has published many books. He told himself he would not go back to his wife. He seemed hurt and shocked. Then he couldn't resist, so he took his car back to a motel. He then took the key from reception and left. He goes into a motel room and finds his wife, Amy, having an affair with her friend Ted. 6 months later, after the incident, Morton was living in a remote cabin in Tashmore Lake, New York. Morton suffered from depression and writer's block, feeling exhausted and slow in writing new books. A man named John Shooter comes to his cabin and accuses him of stealing his story. Morton denied it and said he would never take accusations of plagiarism lightly. The shooter then tried to give him his own manuscript as evidence, but Morton closed the door. He then left and Morton tried to remember his license plate number. When Gunner left, he went outside and discovered that the guy had left the manuscript outside his door. The manuscript is called Sowing Season by John Shooter. He then threw it in the trash and tried to go back to sleep. He then asked his dog if he could give him any hints to continue the book. He looked at his manuscript and thought he was no longer capable of writing anything good. Too tired of everything, he deleted what he had just written. Then the maid told her that she found her story in the trash, so she took it out. He read a few lines and knew that it was very similar to his own story called Secret Window. He panicked and dropped the glass. He apologized to the maid, but she felt bad that her manuscript had been destroyed. He denied it and said he did not write it and that it was written by John Shooter. He then read his own work. He was shocked to see that the story was exactly the same. He has a vision of his wife. She opens a window and tells him that it is a secret window. He wanted to smoke and he assured his dog that he did not steal the story. The cleaning lady appears and assures him that his wife made a mistake by cheating. Some women don't realize that they have the whole world in front of them and they leave. When she leaves, he goes downstairs, still telling himself that he didn't steal the story. He then had a strange vision in his sleep. He woke up to a phone call. Amy is worried about his health and wants to know if he is okay. And if their dog is okay, then he'll ask them about their story, The Secret Window. He asks her if she shared her story with anyone, and she doesn't remember. He invites her to meet Ted for a drink, but she doesn't care and she is happy with her friend Ted. He wishes them luck living in the house he bought with his own money, and he hangs up, only to blame himself for everything again. The next day, he went into the woods and found John Shooter waiting for him. Morton wants to know when Shooter wrote his version of the book, because he wants to know who wrote the story first. Shooter claims he wrote this story 7 years ago, in 1997, and then started roasting it like beef. Morton claims he wrote the story in 1994, meaning he wrote it 3 years before him, and he invalidates all charges against Shooter. The shooter threatened him to come to his home in New York and say hello to his wife. Morton reveals that he is getting divorced and no longer owns the house. Shooter warns him that the problem with him will only lead to the death of one of them. Then he gives him 3 days to prove that Morton wrote the book first, otherwise he will take down he. Later that day, Morton didn't believe it and asked his dog that even though he was a blind dog he still loved him, but why didn't anyone who saw him love him? The dog heard something and went out. Morton takes a nap and he has another vision, where he fell from above. He woke up and found a note outside the door. He discovers the light bulb is broken. He then went outside to investigate and found a note from the shooter giving him a warning and telling him not to go to the police. Under the letter, he found his dog stabbed to death. The next day, he made a grave for his dog. He then went to Sheriff Newsom and informed him about the letter and his dog. The police chief seemed to be avoiding the main topic. Morton wants him to talk to the shooter, and he just wants peace and nothing else, but the sheriff talks about everything but the subject. Later that day, he went to see his friend, private investigator, Ken Karsh. They talked for a bit and it turned out that Morton had also been accused before and Ken had taken care of him, so this time he also wanted his help. Morton claimed that he had the original copy of the book, which he wrote 2 years before John Shooter wrote his version. Unfortunately, the book is at Amy's house and the two of them are no longer together. Ken joked that you must have fucked other girls. In reality, Amy was hitting on another guy. He then apologizes and Ken assures him that he will check his house. Later, when Morton returns to the old house to retrieve the manuscript, he sees Amy and Ted. Disgusted with this couple, he decided to leave from there. That evening, he returned to his cabin and found a car there. He approached and saw Ken dead. The only thing that dies, however, is its humor. They then searched the cabin and found no one there. Morton claimed that a guy named Tom had seen him and shooting earlier while they were talking. Ken assured him that nothing would happen and he decided to leave. Morton asks where he will spend the night, and it turns out Ken will be living in the same motel where Morton discovered his wife's affair. As Ken leaves, Morton hears noises from upstairs. He took a poker from the fireplace and went upstairs, but there was no one there. Then, in the bathroom, he saw a shadow in the mirror. Hearing no response, he went there and swung the hammer but only broke the mirror. He then broke open the bathroom door and found a rat there. He then carefully grabbed the mouse and the cigarette that he tried to stop. He went out and freed the mouse. The shooter says, "I thought you gave up," revealing that he knows more about himself than he thinks. The shooter said, "You went to Amy's house, but why didn't you take the book?" The shooter wanted him to revise the ending of his version of the book, in which the main character kills his unfaithful wife. He then mentioned that his wife said she was very spicy. Morton attacks him, but Shoot overpowers him and threatens to attack his wife if he does not correct the end of the book. The next day, Morton receives a call from Amy. She panics and tells him that someone burned down their house. Morton arrives there and learns that the original copy of his book has now been burned. Amy and Ted go there. The detective talks to them and reveals that the fire started due to the use of Molotov cocktails. He asked if they had enemies. They said no, but Morton told them about shooting. The insurance adjuster gave them a list of items they could claim, and since they had both filed for divorce, the items were split in two. Morton seems stressed about his divorce, but the investigator assures him that he will be fine, and that she has been through it too. As they both looked over the list, Ted appeared curious. Then Morton asked him to leave the room, and he was forced to leave because the items did not belong to him. Then, Amy is afraid of Shooter and she wants him to pay, like they did last time when someone accused him. He assured her that nothing would happen. Next, Ted and Morton talk about their relationship. Ted wants him out of their lives. Morton asked him where the couple was going after the house burned. Ted replied, "A place called Shooting." Morton recalled the other guy's full name was John Shooter. That evening, Morton returned to the cabin and received a call from Ken. They talked for a bit and the only evidence he had was that he had been burned in the fire. However, Ken reveals that he has found a magazine that publishes his story, which will prove his innocence and it will arrive at a later date. Also, Ken told Morton that he went to see a guy named Tom, and he said that Tom was scared at the mention of the shooter, so they speculated that the shooter might have threatened him. Morton claims that Ted may be involved because he gave him a clue as to the shooter's name. Ken suggests that they meet Tom the next day and get him to tell everything. Ken then prepares to meet Tom. The next day, Morton woke up late and missed his appointment, then discovered his car keys were missing. He then prepared to leave and found the hat the shooter was wearing by the door. He also went to her car and found her there. Surprisingly, he found a cigarette but there. He took the hat as evidence. He went to the place where they had agreed to meet. He asked the cashier and learned that Ken had not shown up. On the way home, Morton sees Ted at the gas station. He didn't expect him to be there, so he stepped back and faced him. Ted said he was there to see him. Then he asked Morton to sign the divorce papers. From the beginning, Morton was reluctant to sign the papers but still thought he could get his wife back, so he got angry and speculated that Ted was working for Shooter, so he left. He returned home and sooner or later, he received a call from Shooting, asking him to meet at the same place to receive a special gift. Morton went there in sports mode. He arrives in a jeep and finds Tom killed with an axe, and Ken also killed. Morton lost consciousness after the incident, only to wake up and find Sniper next to him. The shooter said the two men were killed with an axe from Morton's house with his fingerprints on it. Morton claimed he owned the magazine and could prove his innocence. Shooting required him to revise the stories, ending with his version of the book. Morton maintained his innocence and Shooter said he was not crazy and could not have had the magazine, but if he had, he would have gone to the police and left. Morton then removed his tools from Tom's head to remove the evidence. He then pushes Tom's jeep off the cliff, but his watch gets stuck on the turn signal. He tried to free his hand, but the watch remained inside the jeep and from there fell into the water. He then returned home and received a call from Amy. She was worried about him. She cried and thought that if they had not lost their child before, things would have been different. He asks her what she thinks of Ted and she says she likes Ted. She claimed that Morton had been busy writing books for the past 2 years and never had time for himself, and she wanted him to sign the papers, only to reveal that she was nice to him and make him sign the divorce papers, so he hung up the phone aggressively. Amy prepares to confront him with the divorce papers. Ted wants to go with her, but she refuses, because this will only make things worse. Morton then went to the post office to pick up the package containing the magazine. The woman who worked there gave him the package and she told him that she had seen everything he did, only to correct herself by saying that she saw his new look. That's so attractive. He then returned to the car. The sheriff approached him and he said he was busy. At home, Ted was worried, so he decided to go into the cabin as well. Morton knew that the package had been opened. He then checked the magazine and discovered that someone had torn the pages of his story from the magazine. He talked to himself about how this could happen. He entered the cabin and saw the shooter's hat. He put it on. Soon he started talking to himself. His inner self insists that he should call the police and they should put him in jail before he causes more damage. His inner self further confirmed that there was no shooting John at all, and it was all in his head. Morton became frustrated and upset. He threw an object at the wall. Then, to his surprise, the crack began to grow rapidly enough to split the cabin in half. He looked in the mirror and was shocked to see the back of his head in the mirror. The shooter appears and he begins to reveal that Morton gave birth to his character. He reveals that he was the one who started the fire in the house, And then he was the one who took Tom and Ken to a remote area and killed them. Morton realizes that John Shooter is just a figment of his imagination and that he must revise history to eliminate him. Before that, Amy arrived at the cabin. She walked away and found the magazine page. She searched for Morton and found the house in disarray. There was an empty bottle of Jack Daniels and an empty pack of cigarettes. She heard noises from upstairs and saw the word shooting game repeatedly engraved on the table and throughout the house, as well as on the walls. Morton appeared before her, talking and acting like a gunman and even wearing his hat. He then attacked her with scissors, but she managed to reach his car. He then fixed the hat and took a rock to break the window. He carried her out of the car and took her back to the cabin. She tried to run but fell to the ground and hit her head on a rock. He reveals that the word shooter means to shoot him, coming from a desire to shoot him. Before that, Ted came to find Amy. Morton hits him with a shovel while Amy watches helplessly. Then he kills him with the shovel. Then he walked up to her and told her a quote from his book that one day his death would be a mystery, even to me. A few months later, Morton recovered and went to a store. There he saw the woman working at the post office. She seemed scared and tried to avoid him. The sheriff arrives at the cabin. The cabin now looks tidy. There is a lot of corn in the kitchen. Morton invites the sheriff upstairs, and the sheriff declares that everyone knows what he has done, and eventually the bodies of the missing will be found and he will be arrested. He tells her that people are uncomfortable seeing him in town and that he is no longer welcome there. Morton says the only thing that matters is the ending, and this is the perfect ending. It is believed that Amy and Ted's bodies were buried under the cornfield. And he said that one day his death would be a mystery, even to me. And the movie ends. Don't forget to like, subscribe and let me know what you think about the movie.